So yeah, I'm going to talk about a topic that is very dear to me, and that is how to go from the reactive way that FinOps was into a proactive mode, and that is by shifting left. And so if you think about before shifting left, then you would have the typical traditional problems of forecasting would in most cases be yesterday's cost plus minus X. And Frank can concur, he's also on the call. That's the worst way of do forecasting actually, right? Product estimates. We are going to launch a product in cloud and everyone says it's basically unpredictable. So we have a large challenge there to actually get some cost estimates before migrating or creating new workflows in the cloud, workloads in the cloud. Same thing with budgets. So if you can't forecast, if you can't have any cost estimates, you just set up a budget and that's it. I mean, that's how you work because you don't have the information, you don't have the governance in place to actually do some budgeting properly. And I will now quote a finance manager I have heard in, I didn't participate in the conversation myself, but it was related to me. At a large organization, a finance manager said this: we have a purchase order for 2 million monthly with AWS. How dare they send an invoice that doesn't equate to 2 million, right? So yeah, you have to deal with that kind of things when you want to deal shift left. So sorry. Yep, this. So before shifting left, you have the product definition, you go to solution architecture, you have the development stages, and then sooner or later it's handed off to operations. And then when it starts costing too much, in comes the FinOps team. And what they normally are able to look at is to deal with operations and try to right size and maybe change some resource types and some tagging and a little bit. But I mean, it's a long way, as you can see, going back to the, how can I say, going back all the way to products. So in that sense, it's almost like waterfall. Also consider all of these cases where you're migrating workloads that were created before the cloud. So you maybe have some black boxes in there, or you have an application that uses different security providers. I know one organization that has 17 security providers in their cloud estate at the moment, which is crazy. So there's a lot going on about how we can finally shift there. And there is one thing that I would love to address, and that is when it comes to legacy companies who are talking about going to the cloud. And their reaction is more or less like this. Because they think cloud is just someone else's computer, they treat it like a data center. So what they want is to have the exact same touch and feel like on-prem. And so they are asking for a landing page. So typically they will have someone build a custom platform for them, which will probably last 3 years project. I know of a project that lasted 4 years, still not finished, and they have upscaled it to 300 people working on the platform. I'm not joking. What makes me really hurt there, it's European funded. So I would love for them to have an audit, out with the people, in with the lawyers. So yeah, so we have this huge problem of people that treat cloud as something toxic. They don't want to learn anything new. They are blissfully happy, ignorant, and they want it to stay that way. So they maybe outsource everything cloud, but rather than upskilling. And that is the major problem with everything. Companies are migrating to the cloud before upskilling the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, it's not just engineering, it's also finance and procurement and also executive if there are made to be any strategic decisions. So there is an ongoing shift left initiative, and it's called product. I've taken this directly from their page, sorry. So it's called cost-aware engineering decisions for products. Okay. or cost-aware product decisions. Now, I have several issues here with what they want like to do, because they expect the product teams to predict the cost of the cloud. So this only works if you have enlightened teams and if one knows what they're doing. And I think we all collectively know how often that is the case. So that is one problem. The other problem is, in my view, that the same product requirements from one team might lead to different solutions in the architecture with another team working with them because of the solution architect's background or personal preferences and all of that implications. So how can we even make product decisions that are cost aware if we don't know all the alternatives that we could build the solution with? And that is the issue that I want to address today, with how I see how a large organization can shift left effectively with a long-term strategy and short-term tactical operations. And so just a couple of facts. I know I'm Captain Obvious now, but let's think about how we generate costs in the cloud. Whenever we manipulate, transfer, or store information or data, right? That's, I think, abundantly clear. Okay, you can have idle running resources, I know, but this is, the main cost factors are data, everything around data, right? Manipulate, transfer, and store. So what I'm getting at is, who decides what data is being manipulated, transferred, or stored? That's my question. Who decides that? Because that is the key. Because if you think about it, the product team, with their product requirements and specifications, they know exactly feature by feature what kind of information will be manipulated, transferred, and stored, and also how often, because they should have some information at least. They should have this information about the user base, right? So another fact is, these are data access patterns, and while that sounds very techy, data access patterns existed before IT existed, because data is just a multiple form of information. So a collection of information is called data. You had data analysis before computers existed. So let's go back to the product team. And if they don't have it already, they should, for each service, define the data access pattern. That means somewhere in the user story that they describe, for each feature, they have that kind of information flows from A to B, or is manipulated, or is stored. That is something that the product team must specify, okay? And it's not a technical challenge. It's a challenge to get them to do it. That's another thing. But it's not a technical challenge. They should not hide behind the excuse of, oh, it's cloud, oh, it's IT, or something like that. They should really do that part in the product management, and might also get help, obviously, from the product owner. So, as I said, yes, we should ask the product managers. Now, my suggestion is one step further. I would love to introduce technical product management, right? So we have some product managers with a strong technical background and some senior solution architects to join a new team. Might be virtual, might be just a group of interest, or could be really a proper team. Now, they can help product teams that have never done this specify said access patterns. That means they can go there and tell them, okay, that is your user story. We will translate that into specifications of how data is manipulated, stored, and transferred. And then that is good. We will just, confirm, sign it off. Those are your specifications. Because the key information here is that data access pattern actually dictate solution architecture. That, I will read it again, I will repeat it over and over. The data access patterns, they should dictate the solution architecture. For each access pattern, there is one most efficient architecture to implement this in the cloud. Okay? So it should not be the preferred solution architecture that, oh, I've always worked with Docker, then I will use Docker for everything. Or it's like, oh, we want to do cross-cloud or whatever. No, there are over 200 services just on AWS alone. So start using them. Build patterns in architecture. And that is the next thing. So for each central, you should create and maintain central decision patterns and building blocks. That means, let's go through one decision. You want to create a new platform, you need to store data. Okay. The questions you should ask, okay, are how is the data structured? As in, is it strongly relational? Or could I use non-relational database? Okay, that's one question, for example. Then another is, how often do I access this information? Is it transactional data that I just, for each sales transaction or for each financial transaction, I just create some almost like a log entry? So do I just bombard on the right side? Or is there a read intensive analytics thingy going on in the back? Those access patterns will define what the best architecture for your cloud application is. Okay. And the other thing that you should do with such a technical product management team is actually have peer reviews. So everyone that comes up with a new decision pattern or a building block should have the team review it and see if everyone agrees that that is the best solution. So, for example, if we have non-particularly relational data that is accessed sometime, let's say 5 times per month or stuff like that, I don't need a relational database that's running up and running the whole month. I could use, for example, DynamoDB for that, or I can use MongoDB or another DB, depending on what the decisions of that technical product management team is, right? So same goes for, I have an application that handles, I don't know, 1 million requests per month for these sets of access patterns. And then you can decide whether you want to go with AWS step functions, whether maybe a Lambda is better, or if you want to have a virtual machine, or actually if it may be something that will run in the cloud and at the customer side and everywhere. And then finally, and almost only in that case, is Docker the best solution? So all these access patterns, I tell it again, dictate solution architecture. There should no personal preference should be allowed. So what does that mean actually? So the whole thing that I created before is no longer a waterfall model, because the product will go with their requirements to the technical product management team and say, these are our user stores, these are our features and services that we want to do. And they will together create these data access patterns. Okay, so these data access patterns will then basically go to solution teams, solution architecture teams, and for each of these data access patterns, they will just pick a compatible building block. They should not be allowed to create a new architecture from scratch. They should only be using building blocks from the central decision patterns. Okay, if there is something that is not in there yet, then there should be an urgent work of creating such a building block based on that decision pattern. So in that sense, the solution architecture loses parts of its design role because they go from creating the architecture from scratch to actually just picking building blocks. So that is why I also suggest that the technical product management team, or the center of excellence, if you want to give it another name, should include senior solution architects, right? Otherwise, the solution architecture team will not be happy if you take the part of their work away, right? And once the solution architectural team has decided on how this architecture is with the used building blocks, that can also go back again to the TPM team for review if you want it. I didn't write it in here. It was getting fairly confusing, but it goes to into the efficiency review. So the we check if the right building blocks were used and if that also matches what we have from the requirements from the product team before going to development. And that is where all this shift left in. We're doing all these cost efficiency decisions far away from running anything in the cloud, right? So only once it has been approved, yes, this is the most efficient solution for the data access patterns that have been established and signed off on, only then goes it into development, and then only then will it go into operations. Now, what will operations do? They will provide performance metrics and logs, and FinOps will also collaborate with the TPM team to discuss the cost and usage reports. And again, that will flow back into an efficiency review with actual metrics, logs, and costs to actually see if the design of these building blocks was correct, because we might have made a wrong assumption here and there. So now we get confirmation of what actually was, how efficient it actually was, right? Now you will say, yes, that is fine for new applications. And so I will get to that question later. But so the why this actually works is we have a consistent solution architecture throughout the whole application. You can have 1,500 applications running. If you have this pattern in place with the governance from top, then you can have consistency throughout the whole architecture. That also means, and here again, sorry about that iron triangle, I bash you every time. With this quality setup, we can have new products shipped faster, cheaper, and with high quality. Yes, again, sorry, iron triangle, I know how you loved, but here again, we can have all three angles of the triangle at max with this approach. Another thing that happens here is we get better forecasting because the product team had to actually tell us about the usage and the data before it was built, right? So we can finally go into better forecasting. Then we can play gamification with the efficiency score, right? So what does that mean? And that is also what I meant by how this actually can work. Now, gamification for me is the carrot, right? And carrot draws also the stick. So we could have carrot and stick. So if you have an old legacy environment that has been migrated to the cloud, what you could do is you review the entire application estate and check if they're compliant with the central decision patterns and building blocks. Most likely they will not be, which is fine to start with. But then you go pick the applications prioritized by either cost, strategic alignment, importance, criticality. There are different ranking methods that you can pick there, but pick your applications you want to start with, build your TPM team, create these building blocks. And let's say we start really from scratch up. Tomorrow we create a TPM team. We start with this. Now in comes the gamification. That is nice. But if you just started with one application, that means that simply the others will not be in that yet because you cannot evaluate all of them together. So gamification is not the first thing you can start with. But there's another thing, and that's a stick that you can start with very soon. Once you review an application, you can tell them how far off they are from the ideal efficiency. And the ideal efficiency is basically, as I said before, if we know what information is manipulated, stored, and transferred, we could calculate the optimum minimum, the theoretical minimum to achieve that feature or service, right? So the efficiency score is simply the percentage or the orders of magnitude of that. And that could go into a budget rating. So if they ask for a budget next year, simply we will say, hey, you have a very bad efficiency score. So you will get less budget than you're asking for. So you have to optimize. That is one thing that you can do. Not very nice, but I say, hey, sometimes you have to use the stick in large organizations to get something done. The other thing that I've seen work wonderfully, but never say it came from a FinOps team, don't do that, is to use chargeback as a gamification tool. And that is simply let's say that we have analyzed an application and they are way off. So after 6 months that we send them recommendations on how to actually improve stuff, after 6 months, we go from 100% chargeback to 200%. 6 months again, they are not doing anything. We go up to 300%, 400%, and 500%. You can choose where to stop, but I think 500% is typically enough. So that happens. You don't have to ask them for motivation and time to do so. They will come to you. They will come running to this TPM team or the solution architecture team to say, how can we fix this? Because the chargeback is basically killing us, right? So that is how you can play a little bit with both carrot and stick. But again, it's the most important thing is to drive these decisions back to product, because product decides what we are going to build, and the rest is only about how we build it and how we run it. And again, these data access patterns, they dictate the solution architecture. So that was me, an old man ranting on about stuff in large organizations. Thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Erik. Leave some hearts and some love to Erik. I think it was very interesting, and there was a lot of support on your TPM approach.
Thank you for having me.